Well, good afternoon. Today, our government shared our plan for growing a stronger economy that works for everybody. Our plan for jobs, our plan for opportunities, our plan to build Ontario. It's a plan that is prudent and responsible. It's a plan to protect the progress we have made. It's a plan to build for the future. And it's a plan to work for the workers who make it all happen. As a government, we do not want to go back to the politics of no. Instead, we are saying yes. Yes to building, yes to investing, and yes to growing. It's a plan that says yes to the better and brighter future that the people of Ontario deserve. I'll now take your questions.
Peter, Minister, in the
No problem, Rob.
March 24th budget, you pointedly did not mention Highway 413 or the Bradford bypass, even though there were 40 mentions of highways in that statement. What has changed between now and then?
Well, we're roughly 6 months further down the road, and what we're signaling today and making it very clear, Rob, is that we're building. We're serious about building Highway 413. This is the first time that we're actually putting money in the capital plan, that we're advancing the Bradford bypass. Of course, there's still a lot of planning and process and assessments that have to occur, and you don't build these things overnight, but we're very serious about moving people and goods. I mean, congestion and gridlock you just see it today. And with the population growing by about 1 million every 5 years in the greater Golden Horseshoe, 2 million over 10 years, not all of them will be in Toronto, where we're building subways to take cars off the road, where we're building so people can move more effectively. You can't cycle and walk in parts of the 905. So we've got to build highways, and so we're just moving that along, and that's what's changed since March.
And in the statement you talked about, or in the statement in the House, you talked about that the New Democrats and the Liberals are sort of enthroned to what you called "quote unquote" downtown activists. Just wonder if you could expand on that. What do you mean? Are you trying to say that people downtown don't understand people in the 905 or have different concerns?
I think we're addressing the concerns of people in Toronto, with the building of the subways. That frankly, a lot of
for the downtown activists.
They're for people, the millions of people that live in this great city here, that we're here today. It's for the people that would have us never build anything. And I think it's not just targeting any particular individual, but the people who would never have us build a hospital, never have us build another road or another bridge. This plan that I've highlighted today, Rob, is so much about building and hospitals and long-term care facilities and highways and bridges and broadband, which we've accelerated. So that's what this is about, and it's addressed to the people who want us to build things.
Minister, you mentioned the capital plan for these highways. The budget doesn't say, the economic statement doesn't say how much it's going to cost to build those. So why not, and why can't you tell the people of Ontario what it's actually going to cost to build these two highways?
Well, it's still very early stages in the process. As Rob Benzie just mentioned, this is the first time we've actually put money in the capital plan for the Highway 413. We're advancing the plans, which are still early, on Bradford bypass, and of course there's a lot of commercially sensitive information that goes with that. But what I'm saying is that we're putting money aside. We'll continue to put money aside, and we'll continue as we go through the process of planning and design and the assessments to figure out exactly how much this is all going to cost. We haven't gone to any procurements, no competitive tenders. So, Mike, and I think you would know and would agree, it's premature to put definitive numbers in place. But as Rob Benzie just asked, we're putting money aside to build highways.
Okay, so, and then the budget though for building hospitals, schools, and transit is exactly the same as your budget was to build hospital, schools, and transit back in March. So how is that building Ontario if you're doing exactly what you were saying you were going to do back in?
Well, still in the fiscal year, and I guess what we're highlighting is the additional things that that's why it's a mini budget. It's not the full budget, and we'll have a lot more to say in the budget that'll come in the spring. But increasing the capital plan by up to $148 billion, being very clear about our intention to build highways that the people of Ontario want us to do, is what we're clearly signaling here, and I think that's perhaps the largest capital plan in the history of this province.
Minister, affordability is a big issue in Ontario. The cost of living, as you guys have acknowledged, is high. The Premier a couple of days ago said, yeah, I'm going to cut the 5 cents off the gas tax. Yet today, furiously looking through the budget, through the mini budget, why didn't you cut 5 cents off the gas tax in this document?
Well, you're right. The Premier did talk about the gas tax the other day, and I think you would agree, Colin, that by the price of a lot of things is going up, and the gas tax is part of that. And so the Premier very clearly mentioned that working with the federal government, we should try to find a way to make things more affordable for the people of Ontario. We just did that in a large way for over 750,000 Ontarians through the increase in the minimum wage. I mean, that's 760,000 people who just got a raise, and many of who are on their day-to-day expenditures and groceries and Christmas is around the corner and other holidays. They've had our back, so we're moved on the minimum wage. So
the minimum wage doesn't take effect until 2022, so it doesn't impact Christmas this year. But I'm talking about the gas tax specifically, because minimum wage earners might not make enough to be able to drive a car to afford the gas in the first place. So the gas tax specifically, why was it not cut in this fiscal update?
Well, we've done a lot to address affordability. As I just said, the minimum wage is gone up. That starts January 1st instead of October of next year, so that's going to be a good pay hike for many. It's 760,000 Ontarians. The increase for the servers, we're the second to last province to actually make that increase. So moving Ontario forward, we're now the second highest minimum wage in the country, and all these things add up to putting more money in the pockets of Ontarians. You would know, as many of you know, that we have some of the lowest personal income tax rates here in Canada, in this province. With our low-income tax credit, we are actually the lowest in all of Canada for people making up to $30,000. So we are addressing affordability. As the Premier mentioned on the gas tax, we're having lots of discussions with the federal government. I mentioned today, for example, the Ring of Fire, where we're investing $1 billion. We're asking the federal government, to join us in co-investing in the Ring of Fire and in many other areas where we have a very good dialogue with the federal government.
Minister, on a similar topic, the middle-class tax cut that was promised in 2018 is not in this document. This document shows that income tax revenue is increasing at a level that wouldn't take account for something like that being introduced. Is that not happening? Is that not happening in this mandate? Is that going to be something you introduce in the budget to campaign on? Can you tell me where that promise is at?
I'm not going to speculate on what we may or may not do in the budget. I've just tabled the fall economic statement, which Rob Benzie calls the mini budget, so I'll go with that. And we've very clearly, we have a plan to start to come out of the pandemic. We're not going to give up the hard-fought gains, and we made significant announcements today in protecting our fight against COVID-19, protecting our progress. But we're very clearly signaling that economic recovery is at hand, that building Ontario, these are good-paying jobs that will be across the province in terms of infrastructure build, and then working for workers and putting a number of things in place today, such as the jobs training tax credit, the staycation tax credit, so that people will travel and support businesses here in Ontario, the seniors home living tax credit, which will help many seniors retrofit their homes for as they in their home want to stay longer. So there's lots of things that that address affordability. Today's not the day that I'm talking about personal income tax.
Minister, how worried are you about inflation persisting and interest rates increasing?
So by the way, congratulations, Laura.
Thank you very much.
Another taxpayer coming on.
Yeah, no, that's, Laura's doing her part. So inflation, do I worry about it? Absolutely. Inflation, particularly for people with low income, seniors on fixed income, the pandemic has really hurt a lot of more precarious and vulnerable workers, and that's why it's so important to move the minimum wage and the labor shortage that we have. Many central bankers and economists say it's going to be temporary, but today it's impactful, and that's why we put in place a number of things today to help on affordability, and we'll continue to monitor that very closely.
And just hold on, sorry, thank you. And just on the healthcare staffing piece, you've announced a lot of money for staffing, but what about retention? We didn't hear anything about permanent increases for PSWs, again, as the Premier has been promising. The nurses are talking about Bill 124 and a wage cap. So you're announcing this hiring blitz, but what are you doing to actually keep these people on board?
That's a great question with regard to retention. That's something we've seen. I toured a number of hospitals. I went into emergency rooms. I talked to a number of the hardworking nurses and staff in our hospitals, and they are working around the clock. And that's why it was so important to put in additional funding for mental health and addiction to help in a very stressful environment. I heard that. The hiring of 5,000 registered nurses and registered practitioner nurses, as well as 8,000 PSWs, is because we have people leaving the industry. We have people, we have an aging society where in lots of areas, like the skilled trades, like in the healthcare system, people are aging out. What's important for us to do is make sure that they have the training, that we build the capacity, modern facilities. I mean, in that same hospital that I toured, the ambulance bay has been converted into the emergency intake administration because they're running out of room. That's why it's so critical that we, as I mentioned in the budget, build hospitals, and many that I mentioned today, build more long-term care facilities, and then have the staffing to support that, the training, the modern facilities, and the retention. So compensation is one element of that, and clearly we're supporting the personal support workers, extending it till March 31st, the $3 pay bump, and obviously we're going to stand behind the Premier's commitment to make it permanent.
Minister, I had another question about the highways.
Votre budget contient presque rien pour l'environnement. Quel message est-ce que ça envoie, ça, alors que la COP26 se poursuit à Glasgow?
Oui, il y a beaucoup pour l'environnement. Nous sommes en train d'investir pour les véhicules électriques ici, à l'Ontario, avec le Nord, investir pour des chemins pour les minéraux critiques au Nord. C'est tous pour investir pour les voitures électriques ici. Nous sommes en Ontario, il y a 94, notre émission sont avec zero carbon emissions, notre électricité. Nous sommes le plus grand province au Canada pour les obligations vertes, pour les projets verts. Alors, on fait beaucoup dans cet espace et on va continuer de faire des investissements pour un environnement.
Minister, thank you. I was hoping to ask you a little bit more about the highways. When it comes to the amount of money that you just allocated for them, 1.6 here, 2.5 there. When the overall cost of Highway 413 is like $6 to $10 billion, according to some older estimates, how much do you actually expect that this money is going to push them forward? How serious are you about getting them done quickly? What are you expecting here?
Well, very serious to get them done, number one. Obviously, we'd like to get them done as quickly as possible. I mean, there's gridlock and congestion today. Our studies indicate that there's $11 billion in lost productivity per year because of gridlock. Imagine what that's going to be like in 5 years when there's 1 million more people in the GTA. In 10 years, 2 million more people. So, this is a government that doesn't just talk about it. This is a government that gets things done. You saw how much talk there was for years and years about building subways in Toronto and in the GTA. We're getting it done. We've got commitments from the federal government, from the municipal government, the provincial government. We're moving forward so we can get cars off the road with public But clearly, we got to move goods in the 905 and parts of the province that are growing really fast. So we're committed to putting in the funding. We're going to have start the process, particularly with the 413, with regard to the more design and planning that has to go with that, the consultation that has to go with that, the assessments, and we'll continue to build not just the Bradford bypass and the 413, but highways, waterworks right across the province. And I'll point you specifically to the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund. That we just doubled that today. That's going to double the amount of investment that municipalities, 424, can make in many of our rural and small communities in Ontario for bridges, for roads, for water treatment and wastewater. So we're getting things done. We're building infrastructure, and we'll commit the funds to get that done.
The Ring of Fire has been stalled for years. How is anything that you've announced today actually going to fix the problems that have plagued that development?
Well, one of the critical areas for the Ring of Fire, where there's proven reserves in some of those critical minerals that are necessary for batteries to power the electric vehicles, and I mentioned in French that we are investing significant dollars along with the federal government to attract electric vehicle production in Ontario. So the Oakville plant and Ford Oakville plant.
The desire for money is the issue.
Yes,
Like,
if I may, there is critical minerals that go into batteries, lithium, the cobalt, there's nickel and copper, but you got to have infrastructure to get there. And so what we're committing is $1 billion to actually build the infrastructure so that we can put that value chain together from vehicle production, the great jobs in manufacturing electric vehicles, to battery plants, to the critical minerals, and open up the north for prosperity. As I mentioned, there's 90% of the population up there is First Nations, and what we've announced today, we're doing in consultation and in partnership with those First Nation communities that deserve those good paying jobs and that prosperity, and doing it in a way that respects land plan use and assessment process, but doing it in a consultative way with First Nations and many other stakeholders.
How does getting rid of land use, the requirement for land use plans, actually increase collaboration with First Nations, or using traditional knowledge, or getting the roads built that the statement actually promises? Not
getting rid of land use planning. I mean, it exists. That process will continue, as well as the assessment, all the environmental assessments and all the things that go into planning. But doing it in a collaborative way with the input of all the key stakeholders and as well with the federal government to provide some of the funding. We're putting the money up. We're going to do it together, and I think this is critical for the prosperity of our north, and they've been forgotten for far too long.
Municipal 19 time-limited funding, you're projecting to spend $3-something billion in the next year, next fiscal year. What kind of supports are you envisioning still needing at that point?
Well, thanks, Alison. It's a really good question about setting aside time-limited COVID funding. You know what? One of my jobs as the Minister of Finance is to always make sure there's enough funds because you never know what exactly is around the corner. We went through the third wave in the first quarter of this fiscal year. We're battling the fourth wave. You know, we watch parts of the world and see what's happening there, and things can turn very quickly. That's why we're not taking our foot off the COVID pedal, and that's why I continue to put money aside to have enough funds in place to be able to make the types of investments. And we are doing just that in terms of some of the announcements that we made today. I mean, $548.5 million for home and community care so that people with post-acute surgeries can convalesce at home with practitioners coming to them and convalesce where they want to convalesce. The complex health needs, we're going to, with that funding, help 21,000 people a year be able to convalesce at home. Home and community care. So we're not going to relent on protecting our healthcare progress, and I'll continue to set aside funds to make sure that there are sufficient funds there. The Premier said we'll do whatever it takes, and I stand behind that commitment. But we're going to get through this. We're going to defeat COVID, and that's why economic recovery and our plan to build Ontario is so significant. The highways, the workers, and doing it together.
Just on the residential school records, the fee waiver,
Mhm.
why eliminate that for 3 years, and why not just just eliminate it altogether permanently?
Well, what we announced today is a 3-year plan, so we'll have more to say in the budget. But I think it's so important to acknowledge clearly the tragedy of our children in First Nations and the residential schools, and that's why we set aside even more money to support today the process of going through the burial sites and letting the First Nations lead that effort, and to let them know we're there for them, and we'll continue to be there for them.
Pourquoi vous avez décidé de n'inclure seulement que 2 petits paragraphes dans l'énoncé économique sur les francophones, alors que vous nous dites que vous déposez la modernisation des lois sur les services en français? Êtes-vous pas fier de la réforme que vous nous proposez?
Oui, absolument. Merci pour cette question. Il y a à peu près 700 000 franco-ontariennes ici en Ontario. Et il y a une croissance dans le budget des dépenses pour notre ministre francophone, Mme Mulroney. Et en plus, la loi qui va améliorer la traduction française, je suis vraiment fier de ça. Et on va continuer cet effort. Dans mon construction de Pickering-Uxbridge, il y a une école française, Roland Marion. Je suis très fier de ça. Et on va continuer d'investir et bâtir des écoles françaises, des traductions françaises, les soutenir pour des economic development français, des entrepreneurs. Alors, ça va continuer.
Vous êtes conscient que les francophones ne seront pas contents d'apprendre que vous avez décidé de finalement pas ramener le poste indépendant du commissaire au service en français. Là, il va y avoir des fortes réactions là-dessus. Vous vous attendez à ça?
Cette commissaire, oui, c'est une décision, une ancienne décision. On va continuer à soutenir les francophones ici en Ontario et comme j'ai dit, c'est très important pour moi. Je suis né à Montréal. Nous sommes tous Canadiens et parlons français. Mes 3 enfants parlent français. Et alors, on va continuer d'investir dans les francophones ici en Ontario.
There are only 2 paragraphs in the full economic statement about the environment specifically, only 4 mentioned specifically about climate. Is the government saying no to climate adaptation and mitigation measures? Because I couldn't find much in the budget, which I thought was especially interesting because the Environment Minister is at COP26 right now.
No, we're saying yes to the environment. Clearly, I'll get into specifics about the yes to the environment. It starts with that 95% of our emissions, electricity-generated emissions in this province, are carbon zero. We're going to continue to focus on lowering carbon emissions. One of the ways you do that is by building public transit and getting cars off the road. One of the ways you do that is by investing in electric vehicles. And to the question earlier, we're putting substantive amounts in terms of attracting capital investment to build electric vehicles here in Ontario. These are good-paying jobs, and that's where, it may seem bizarre to stand with Jerry Dias and Smokey Thomas. As someone asked the other day. But, we're in this together to attract those good-paying jobs. We've got great workers in this province. We've got great auto manufacturers. This is to build electric vehicle cars and lead North America in that production, along with, as I said, battery capabilities and critical minerals that go into that. We have all the ingredients here in Ontario, and that electric vehicle production, as demand goes up, will be built here in Ontario. That's good for the environment. And the last thing I'll say is we lead the country by a large margin on issuing green bonds. And what are green bonds? Green bonds are funding that we can only put against green projects. Ontario is leading the country by any measure, absolute and relative, on issuing green bonds, and we've issued some of the largest green bonds, in fact one this year for $2.75 billion. So we're doing a lot for the environment. We're cleaning up parks, we're cleaning up water, we're cleaning up rivers and lakes, and we're not going to relent in that regard.
This is the last question.
Can I ask about the politics of Highway 413 and the Bradford bypass? I mean, you're saying the only reason that it's different now from the budget was because 6 months has passed. Well, 8 months from now, there is an election. If I have the timing right, but do I?
7 months.
7 months.
6 months to the writ being issued and 7 months to the
6 months
election.
until all of the COVID-19 measures lift as well. Does this? Can you say that these two highways aren't an election ploy? That this doesn't have anything to do with the 905 and the Progressive Conservative Party trying to get more votes?
This is helping all Ontarians. I mean, it's not just about building highways in the 905. That's an important piece that we're very serious about, that we announced today. But it's also about building hospitals, Colin. I mean, we're building a 250-bed brand new hospital in Brampton, 830 beds between the Mississauga Hospital and the Queensway Hospital, a new hospital in Windsor, Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. I mean, we're building hospitals.
All significant to the Progressive Conservative Party. I mean, Windsor is significant, Peel is significant, Ottawa is significant to the PC Party, and the 905 York Region is significant as well. So, are you building Ontario just for the PC Party?
We're building for all Ontarians, and I think broadband. We're building broadband as well. We've accelerated the investment in broadband. We want to build by 2025. Excuse me, 7. This. I'm saying, Colin, what we're clearly doing is investing for all Ontarians. When you get elected to support all Ontarians. And when I got elected back in June of 2018, at my victory speech, I said I'm reapplying for the job. And you got to work hard for 4 years, and then you got to reapply for the job, and we're all going to reapply for the job. What we announced today, I think, makes a lot of sense, and what Ontarians want us to move forward. They want us to rebuild this economy. They want to do it inclusively with all hands on deck, workers right across the province from all backgrounds, and we're gonna do it. And we're gonna lead this country in economic growth. That's our aspiration. And Frank, I'd go farther. We want to lead North America in economic growth and have good-paying jobs in this province.
Great, thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
You
everyone.
downtown activists?
I'm going to be active and go right through that door right now. But thanks. Have a good day, everyone.